Welcome to The Blast Zone, the podcast where we dig up the bombs that shook Hollywood and try to find out why they went up in flames. This week, so that's it, huh? We're some kind of birds of prey? This is Birds of Prey. Welcome to The Blast Zone.
Welcome to The Blast Zone.
We are not a podcast about bad movies. We are a podcast about movies that did badly.
That's right.
I'm Jon Drake, in-house film critic of my Letterboxd account.
And I'm Ian Dukes. I'm a person with thoughts and feelings, and some of them are about movies.
Movies like Birds of Prey, which we'll be talking about today. But before we get into that, Ian, how are things?
Things are all right. Thank you for asking. I taught myself a little health lesson this week. I'm not sure what the lesson was, but I've heard stories from people close to me about how painful and bad it is you get shingles, including from my senator. I didn't hear that story until very recently.
Old Diane, and I do mean old.
Yeah, apparently shingles will fuck you up. And so I was like, I can't be getting that. And you get to a certain age and they're like, oh, there's a vaccine and you should take it. It's 90% effective. So I'm like, okay, I got to do it. I knew from past experience that these kind of vaccines tend to hit me kind of hard. And the story on the shingles one was this one hits you particularly hard. And they weren't kidding. I was wiped out in bed with a fever for like more than a full day after taking this vaccine.
Sheesh.
That was fucked up.
Did you just get shingles?
I mean, thankfully, there's no incredibly painful rash or anything. It's just like you feel kind of achy and feverish. Almost like a tickle. It was a really strange feeling.
Interesting. Yeah.
So I endured this awful little sequence and I'm like, did I do it to avoid some great pain later? I may never know if it actually paid off or it didn't. Kind of a weird state it left me in.
Yeah, it sounds like it. That's pretty rough. I had some reaction to the COVID vaccine, but nothing too major. And like, I don't think I've ever had any negative reaction to a vaccine before that. So I'm not particularly looking forward to the shingles vaccine, but luckily I got some time, you mentioned, until I have to worry about it.
Yeah, it's for us olds.
Maybe they'll come up with a milder vaccine by the time I need one. No, I haven't had any health related issues like that. I'm just getting ready for my Montana trip. I'm getting excited. It's 2 weeks to the day I leave.
That is so exciting. You're going to recreate the final battle scene from Heaven's Gate, I assume.
I'm bringing all my dynamite in my check bag. Can't wait. It's going to be a blast. Ha wordplay.
No, I hope you find something more fun to do than that in beautiful Montana.
I'm anticipating doing a lot of hiking. We're staying near Glacier National Park. That's a famous hiking place. We're doing a boat ride one day on one of the lakes in the park.
Nice.
Yeah, it should be cool. But enough about me and you. Let's talk about what we watched.
Yeah.
I understand we almost had to draw straws this week for who got to bring a certain title to show and tell, and you ultimately won. So why don't you tell me about what we both watched this week that we wanted to talk about?
We both watched a new show called Silo. Just came out. It's on Apple TV Plus. It's an original starring Rebecca Ferguson, who we love, and David Oyelowo, who we love. Like, the whole cast is really good.
Yeah, he's really good in it. So is she, but she's good in everything.
Yeah, so far it's really cool. I'm only 2 episodes in myself.
That's all there is.
I think there's a third one out.
Oh, fuck me. All right, I'm slacking.
Yeah, we got to get on it. It's created by a guy that you are somewhat familiar with by the name of Graham Yost.
You could say that, yeah. What other shows has he created? Do tell.
If he did create a very popular show, it might be something that you'd expect to cross over once a week.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Graham Yost, the creator of Silo, is the creator of Justified.
Justified crossover of the week.
Awesome.
That's our first Justified crossover of the week, but we have a second coming up later. But yeah, I wonder if this is why he wasn't involved in City Primeval, because he's not the showrunner of the new Justified series that's starting in July, I believe.
Okay.
Is the premiere date. I wonder if he was too busy with Silo, because this feels like a big production.
This is serious stuff. You can't divide up your time when you're working on something this big for Apple.
I mean, the production value alone is insane. The sets are, but it is kind of like every episode's kind of like a bottle episode.
Yeah, you're not going anywhere. You go up and down, though. Silo has many, many levels, which you have to traverse with a big circular staircase. I remember all this stuff from the books. So I read the original books by Hugh Howey back in the day. I just discovered them online. They were kind of a phenomenon. He's self-published. He's one of the first people to really be successful self-publishing sci-fi on the Kindle platform. And the series is like even at least as good or better as I remember the books being. Like, what I love about this as really good sci-fi is that it has this premise that's easy to grasp, right? You could tell it to anybody. Outside world is toxic. People live in a big old silo. They live these highly constrained lives due to the way society works down there. But the story makes such good use of the specific features and rules of this world to create the compelling drama that takes place in it. Like, it just feels perfectly organic. And even though it's not breaking new ground, but it uses its specifics so nicely that it just feels really fresh and really engaging. engaging. And I can't wait to soak up the rest of the episodes as they drop.
Yeah, I just want to point out Hugh Howey. That's a real sci-fi author-ass name. But it's got a wild cast, too. We already mentioned Rebecca Ferguson and David Oyelowo. Rashida Jones had a big role in the pilot.
Yeah.
Common is one of the main characters. We have our boy Will Patton popping up as a deputy. And I know Tim Robbins is in the show, but we haven't seen him yet, right?
No, he hasn't arrived in any of the couple episodes that I saw.
Yeah, I'm totally on board. I was hooked from the first episode, and where we don't even really meet Rebecca Ferguson's character until the very end. But like, she gets a pretty cool character intro. And then, like I said, I was already 100% in after the first episode. But once the second episode ended, I was like, okay, I'm 120% in. I need to see where this is going. And
it's pretty cool.
I'm also bringing a show this week because I was feeling like drowsy, tired, not myself one day. And so I put on one of my, what I call like my rainy day movies, movie I've seen a bunch of times that I could just put on and half pay attention to, but like it's comfort in the background. And that's American Gangster, the Ridley Scott, Denzel Washington, Russell Crowe film about Frank Lucas taking over the Harlem drug trade. Then I remembered I've had this show sitting around for over a year now that I've been wanting to watch about Frank Lucas's mentor, Bumpy Johnson. There's a show on Epix called Godfather of Harlem that covers the years following Bumpy Johnson's release from his long prison stretch and how he takes back power in Harlem and deals with the Italian mob to run drugs into the neighborhood and secure his place. And it's Forrest Whitaker playing Bumpy Johnson. So, I mean,
cool.
When you have Forrest Whitaker anchoring your series, that's a good start.
Yeah.
But lots of good actors in this. Chaz Palminteri, Vincent D'Onofrio has probably like the main antagonist of the show.
Nice.
I'm digging it so far. Malcolm X plays a big role. Muhammad Ali, well, he's Cassius Clay at the time. There was a lot more going on in Harlem around that time than I realized. So it's like a fun little historical crime drama that I'm checking out. And I think season 3 is coming soon. So I've got plenty to catch up on, but I'm not too far behind where it feels daunting. Like, this is a good place to jump in, I feel like.
Yeah, great combo of things between that cast and the story and the historical tidbits. Sounds really fun.
I recommend it if you guys have Epix. All 7 subscribers should be watching it.
Yeah.
Let's talk Birds of Prey. This is the rare movie that we've both seen pretty recently before we started researching it for the podcast. So what was your initial impressions of this movie? Do you remember when it came out and how you felt about it at the time?
You know, I was trying to think back. I was probably already staying indoors when this was coming out. I don't want to COVID brag that I was like ahead of the curve
I was the most cautious
as a shut-in, but I was pretty cautious already in February of 2020. Yeah, I'm not sure how much I was aware, but somehow by the time it hit streaming, I was aware of it coming out. And I was like, oh, I got to see that. And I watched it pretty soon after it hit streaming. And I remember liking it. It didn't stick with me as like, oh, that's going into my favorites, but it certainly made a favorable impression. It's a pretty fun movie overall.
That all tracks because it got put on streaming 30 days after it was released in theaters.
Okay.
I think everything was kind of still running business as usual when it was first released, but it became clear pretty soon after that some major shit was happening. So they kept it in theaters, but also put it on streaming very early on. Usually that was still when we were doing the 90-day release window for all movies. And now 30 to 60 is much more the standard.
Yeah, I was just looking. That makes me have to revisit how I remember this because I think February 7th was the theatrical release of this, right?
It was, yeah.
So like the big COVID shutdown day was March 11th. If you remember, that was the night Tom Hanks got it and the NBA shut down the same day. So I'm trying to picture what state my mind I was in at that time. Was I actually sitting down and watching new release comic book action movies in that moment? I don't really know. It's hard to...
What else were you going to do? You can't just sit around and be stressed all day.
I'm pretty good at that now. If I couldn't then, I've gotten better at it.
I think it was like March 2nd or 3rd. Me and my wife, Jamie, had gone to Jamaica for our anniversary.
Oh, wow.
And when we left, everything was pretty much business as usual. But I remember coming home, and if you were coming into Jamaica, they were testing everyone, or at least doing the temperature checks in the airport. They weren't doing it if you were leaving, and there was no testing when we arrived in New York. But like, you were starting to see the signs that this wasn't a small thing that was going to go away on its own.
Yeah.
And that was probably like, March 2nd or 3rd, I think we returned.
Yeah, it's like the beginning of a horror movie.
And I watched Contagion pretty recently too, just to be like, it still freaks me out how accurate Soderbergh was with kind of how it would all go down.
It's funny. I never had the stomach to go back to that. There was definitely a time where it resurfaced and everyone's like, oh, you got to watch this because it was crazy prescient. And I never could switch it on. So one day I'll go back and watch it.
He even predicted like the Alex Jones kind of like shock radio skeptics.
Oh, wow.
Selling their natural remedies like ivermectin and stuff. He got it down to even that detail. It's pretty creepy to watch how you feel like it was made last year because it kind of tracks our journey through COVID so accurately.
That's wild. I got to watch it.
But yeah, Birds of Prey. After last week's epic 100th episode extravaganza that required quite a bit of introspection and deep dive into thematic continuity throughout the film. And it was nice to just throw on a bright, flashy flashy action movie that doesn't take itself too seriously.
It was. It's fun. It's flashy. In general, I consider myself pretty receptive to a cheeky action movie that wants to take me on like a fun but dangerous romp through a heightened comic book world, which is what exactly I would say this movie does.
Sure.
And this movie, like, it almost worked on me. It had me sold in the first 30, 40 minutes. And then I felt like I got stuck in the mud a little bit. But that might be a nitpick. I feel like this movie is so balanced on the edge of likability, lovability, that if you're in a good mood, if you're in the right mood for it, you could totally love it. If you're just not quite ready to buy what it's selling, you could be a little turned off. And so I feel like I slipped back and forth across that tipping point a couple times during my watching and rewatching. But I'm not going to say anything too negative about it. I ended up with a pretty good overall impression.
And I was maybe blissfully ignorant, but I don't remember there being much backlash to this movie from like that gross corner of the internet that thinks any action movie with women in it is like inherently bad.
Right.
Quote unquote woke. And maybe it's because all these characters are already women and they weren't like retrofitting it, but you still expect there to be like a corner of the internet that just hates on it because it's a movie primarily about female friendship, I would say, and finding a camaraderie within the female space.
And to the extent that the Joker is the mascot of a lot of those people who would start that kind of shitty trolling, he is conspicuously not pictured in this movie. He's mentioned several times as the X, but they don't bring him in.
Mr. J. And they didn't even use Jared Leto for the one quick shot of the Joker we get. It's a lookalike that they brought in because busy.
There's one that's kind of over his shoulder, like his back is turned.
Yeah, I think the reaction to Jared Leto's Joker was pretty overwhelmingly negative. And we'd already gotten the Joaquin Phoenix Joker by the time this movie came out. So it would look even worse in comparison, I think, to like the depth that Phoenix brought to that role. So yeah, let's just forget that guy ever existed. That's the best case scenario. He should be an off-screen albatross around Harley's neck and not seen because it sucks.
And it's good. I think it's good narratively for the movie. I like the fact that he operates as a mention and not an actual character.
Yeah, not a ton of great dudes in this movie. There are some dudes in it, but most of them kind of suck.
They're good at being shitty dudes, which we'll talk about.
Sure.
And we'll give them some praise for that.
So who's the guy who rents the apartment to Harley?
Oh, the
guy who owns a Chinese restaurant.
Restaurant. Yeah, but he turns out to be kind of a shit too. So.
He sells her out too. He's the one that we thought was good. Doc.
Okay, Doc. Yeah.
So yeah, Doc he's like the closest thing this movie has to like a decent man, but then he ends up betraying Harley too. So the theme of this movie is not that dudes rock.
No, not at all.
But we'll explain why. They have their reasons. Should I get into the making of the movie?
Yeah, let's hear how this thing happened.
All right. 2016's Suicide Squad movie didn't have a lot of bright spots, but Margot Robbie's performance as psychiatrist turned insane Joker henchwoman / girlfriend Harley Quinn was considered one of the few things David Ayer got right. Even before Suicide Squad's release, Robbie was keen on making a spin-off focused on Quinn and the Birds of Prey, a female-centric superhero vigilante team created by Chuck Dixon and further popularized by Gail Simone. The film was greenlit and announced in May 2016, with Christina Hodson, who had written the then-in-production Bumblebee, penning the screenplay. Cathy Yan, whose only directorial effort, the comedy drama Dead Pigs, hadn't even been released yet, was tapped to direct. Robbie, Hodson, and Yan had a singular vision: make an R-rated superhero movie focused on female friendship.
They'd be masters of karate and friendship for everyone.
The villain would be Roman Sionis, aka Black Mask, and Nicolas Cage, Sharlto Copley, and Sam Rockwell were all considered for the part. Rockwell was even offered the role and declined, and Ewan McGregor was eventually cast.
It's over, Sam. I have the high ground.
McGregor's then girlfriend and now wife, Mary Elizabeth Winstead, was cast as Helena Bertinelli, aka the Huntress, beating out Sophia Boutella, Alexandra Daddario, Jodie Comer, Blake Lively, Vanessa Kirby, Margaret Qualley, and Kristen Milioti for the role. Jurnee Smollett-Bell, Janelle Monáe, and Gugu Mbatha-Raw were up for the role of Canary, with Smollett-Bell eventually scoring the part. Rosie, Perez, and Chris Messina were cast in key roles shortly after, and Ella J. Basco joined the movie in the role of young pickpocket Cassandra Cain. With a budget reportedly in the $100 million range, production was underway in January of 2019, filming in downtown LA, the LA Arts District, and Warner Brothers Studios in Burbank. Filming wrapped in April of 2019 with some reshoots happening in September. A release date of February 7th, 2020 was set, and the movie did respectable business its opening weekend, pulling in $33 million and opening in first place. Critics like the movie too, as it currently sits at 78% on Rotten Tomatoes, a stark contrast to the much maligned Suicide Squad. Unfortunately, Sonic the Hedgehog's emergence as a surprise hit the following week, and the emerging COVID-19 pandemic cut the movie's legs short.
Shorter than a hedgehog. the animal from the circus? I'm just trying to understand here.
And it would take in only $205.3 million, well short of the reported $250 million minimum break-even point. Robbie would return as Quinn in another well-received critically but commercial bomb in James Gunn's The Suicide Squad in 2021, but now she appears done with the character for good.
Oh, that's too bad.
Because she's a Barbie girl in a Barbie world.
But this movie really does set you up for a sequel. We'll talk about it when we get to the plot. It wraps up with a real Marvel style, see you next time, this is what you to expect kind of ending.
Without spoiling anything, we may get more movies set in this world with these characters, but I would not foresee Harley popping up in there, and as I said, maybe as a cameo.
Okay.
As much as she is a fan of the character and enjoyed playing her, I think she's ready to put that behind her.
That seems like a wise choice. It's not something that you want to milk forever.
The character got a good send-off in Suicide Squad, the James Gunn one.
I forgot what happens in that, but...
Big Star pops out and starts killing everyone.
Oh, yeah.
Starry, I think his name was.
Did he have a cute name? I remember him being...
He did. He's a real villain from like DC Comics back in the day, from like the Golden Age when they were just like, fuck it, put a big star in there. Like, who cares? We just
I remember it being unimaginably hideous. That's all I can recall.
In typical James Gunn fashion, he added a lot of like grossness to it.
That movie was just an attempt to gross me out, and it worked.
It did, but in a fun way.
Well,
we both liked that movie, right?
I liked it okay. I think I was a little too grossed out, but I liked a lot about it.
Well, now I'm going to make you rewatch it.
Okay.
So we can talk about it.
I've watched gross things for this show before.
It's true.
I'll do it again. We talked about, in our personal experience, why did this movie bomb? You got to put a lot of it on COVID, right? The timing was just the worst. It actually like closed the movie. But I like how you added the fact that a hedgehog emerged and also helped to kill this movie. Sonic the Hedgehog popped up in the second week and started running all over it.
So I know it might seem like a weird competition between these two movies, because one is a PG, very kid-friendly, silly little movie, and the other is an R-rated, extremely violent and profane comic book movie. But I will say that I think people of my generation, the millennials, if you will, were probably interested in seeing both, because Harley Quinn first became a character on the Batman the Animated Series show, which was like 93, 94. And then Sonic the Hedgehog, that was when he was coming to fame too. So there's a lot of nostalgia for both these characters from people of a certain age. So I couldn't see there being a lot of shared audience between them, even though you might not think so right away.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But I also remember some controversy about this movie before COVID was even, before the situation was really understood, was the title. So this was originally titled Birds of Prey and the Fantabulous Emancipation of One Harley Quinn. And it was, after a couple weeks in theaters and subpar receipts, it was changed to just Birds of Prey. So I feel like that's the kind of buzz that you don't want around your movie. Like, it shows a certain level of panic, I think.
Yeah.
To go in and change the title of a movie when it's already out.
And like, is that even a change? It's like you just stopped reading it sooner.
Right.
It's not, it doesn't change anybody's impression. I don't know. I guess it makes it seem less precocious, which it is a weird, snooty title with a lot of attitude when you try to read the whole thing. So I was like, okay, maybe somebody had second thoughts. Oh, we should have kept it simple, you guys, but it's not going to rescue you at the box office.
Yeah, I like the name. I think it's kind of cheeky in the way that you'd expect this movie to be. So I didn't have a problem with it. But yeah, like you said, they just changed it to the first three words of the title. I feel like that did more harm than good to the movie's prospects, because people probably saw that and were like, if the movie's already out and they can't even decide on what the title is, how much care do they put into the making of the movie?
Which is a shame, because they put a lot into it. I was surprised hearing from you just now all the actors that were considered for these roles, because it's a killer list. Like, they could have picked anybody from these lists and had a fantastic cast. The people that they ended up with are fantastic too, but this movie had an embarrassment of riches going for it, going in.
I think McGregor's really good as Black Mask, but I think Sam Rockwell as Black Mask would have been next level. Like, I lament not getting that.
I'm torn, because I feel like I love what Ewan McGregor did with this role. And as a fan of Sam Rockwell, I'm like, oh man, I would have loved to see him do it too. But I don't feel like it lost a step, or like that's something that where the movie could have used more energy, because he brought so much fun energy to it.
He plays him very interestingly. He's almost like a dandy in some ways. Like,
yeah,
he's always like, yuck, gross. But then he's also like ordering people's faces to be carved off and killing people in exceedingly gruesome fashion.
Yeah, I saw it described somewhere that the essence of his character as a villain is that he's just overly emotional, and that goes in more than one direction. Is not just fury and anger and wrath, but into some silliness. And that seems to be how he was playing him.
And then we got Chris Messina as Mr. Zaz.
Yeah.
I'm a big Chris Messina fan, so I was excited to see him in a big budget Hollywood action movie, and he crushed it. I thought he was terrifying and occasionally hilarious, but always captivating.
Yeah, he's super cool. And I kind of felt like I knew his face, and then I looked him up, and he has this incredible list of credits, and it's all killer spectacular shows that I meant to see and I never saw. And like, he's in so many things and he just perfectly targets nothing that I've seen. I should probably try to catch him in more stuff.
Well, I know you saw him in I Care a Lot because we both watched that and talked about it on the pod. But yeah, he had a smaller role in that, I believe.
We talked about it, but I turned that off after 15 minutes because I was too traumatized by the elder abuse I was seeing on screen.
If you want like a good place to jump into Chris Messina, I would recommend the 2018 miniseries Sharp Objects, which was on HBO.
Okay.
He's kind of like the co-lead of that, and he's really good.
Oh, neat. Okay.
He's good in lots of stuff, but I first discovered him, I think, in the Mindy Project. I used to watch that show with my wife. We were both fans of his, but he was good in the Newsroom. And I know the Newsroom is a divisive show for good reason.
It came up last week that you're a Newsroom watcher. You had to admit it again this week.
Yeah, I know. I can't say I'm a fan because like when I'm watching it, I'm like, this is so stupid.
Oh, okay.
But I'm like, all right, I'll watch one more episode. It's one of those. It's like a guilty pleasure. Like I said, though, I like watching smart people walk and talk. Sue me. But I don't know. You want to start walking through the plot of this movie? There's quite a lot of plot to get through. You struggled mightily with giving us a synopsis to work from here.
Yeah, we should preface this because if you've seen the movie, when you hear us read out the plot, it may sound different. And that's because the movie doesn't take place in chronological order until about halfway through. And at some point during some of these sections, it's clear that you're seeing flashbacks because the Harley Quinn character is kind of narrating the whole movie. And she goes, oh, I forgot to tell you, this is what happened 5 days ago. So it kind of guides you through, but there's just so much of it and so many flashbacks and flashes back to the present that it's really hard to keep track. And so when I tried to write out what happened in the story, I'm like, no, that didn't happen next. That must have happened before that. Ended up trying to unravel this ridiculous ball of yarn. And I think we got to put together in a way that makes sense, but we're going to find out.
Your first pass of the synopsis, I think, broke your brain because you started writing like Rorschach from The Watchmen. You're just like, Harley goes to police station, fights cops. Harley wins. Like curtains. I was like, Ian, is everything okay? Like,
that was all I could handle. I was just jotting down notes in an addled haze. So I was trying to make sense of this story, which is weird for a light comedy action movie for it to be this convoluted. And it kind of doesn't matter. I think that's what was weird.
That was going to be my next point. It was like, yeah, it doesn't add anything. And I think there is something cool about seeing Harley walk into the police station and start just like shooting people. And you're like, what the fuck? And then we have to justify that action with another flashback. But like a lot of the confusion that we both had was like, what's the timeline here? Is this taking place over a couple days, a couple weeks? I think they could have just made this like a 48 hours type of movie.
Yes.
They overly complicated it by making it like, this is 3 days ago. And that, like, you know, none of this really needs that much space to breathe. They could have done this all back to back to back.
And that's the thing is your brain will consume it as a 48 hours continuous action movie. And it kind of doesn't change the plot. It doesn't hurt. There's no big reveals in the flashbacks. There's just connecting some dots.
Context added. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a little bit of gymnastics for their own sake to be like a highly stylized head spinning movie. And it's kind of fun for that. But thankfully, like you said, if you just go, oh, this is all just happening, that's fine too. You don't need to know that she became the bodyguard first. And that's why she knew to call the cop when she saw the friend who she met in the hallway in a different scene stealing the diamond. There's a lot of little details, but then in the end, you know who's where and when they're in jeopardy because you know clearly who the good guys and the bad guys are. So you don't suffer if you haven't connected at all. But it is interesting to try.
Well, let's give it a shot.
Here we go. Harley Quinn, played by Margot Robbie, just broke up with her boyfriend, the notorious Gotham crime lord, the Joker. While she was with Joker, Harley was untouchable. She could pull violent mayhem without fear of reprisal, like recently when she broke the legs of the driver of rival crime boss Roman Sionis, played by Ewan McGregor. Sionis let it slide because he thinks she's still with the Joker, but that won't last long. In the alley outside Sionis' club, a lounge singer with supernatural voice named Dinah, played by Jurnee Smollett, rescues a drunk Harley by kicking the asses of some would-be kidnappers. And after witnessing Dinah's prowess, Sionis hires her as his new driver. This attracts the attention of Gotham City Police Detective Renee Montoya, played by Rosie Perez, who's been tracking Sionis and just lost her old informant, who was his former driver with the broken legs. Meanwhile, Harley eventually caps off her wild breakup bender week by symbolically blowing up the Ace Chemical Factory where she and Mr. J consummated their relationship. By the next morning, all of Gotham City knows the crime's power couple are no more, and a whole bunch of miscreants with a grudge against Harley are suddenly eager to settle their scores. Harley gives Detective Montoya and a bunch of other pursuers the slip and escapes the clutches of one thug with the accidental help of a mysterious assassin known only as the Crossbow Killer, played by Mary Elizabeth Winstead. But eventually, Harley is cornered by a big gang of Roman Sionis' henchmen who capture her and take her back to their boss.
Well done. You got through it. Impressive.
Yeah, that was a lot of characters. That's the thing is there's a lot of characters, right? We talk about it as a movie about friendship between a bunch of women, and there's a lot of women characters to meet.
There's just a lot of characters in general. And like, this might feel like a weird complaint, but there's a lot of nameless characters who do like a lot in this movie. Sionis's driver. Like, that guy should have a name. He's in enough of the movie where like we should know what his name is. The thug that the crossbow killer shoots in the head, like
with the smiley face tattoo the Joker and her put on him. Yeah.
Those guys are in the movie for a little too long to just be nameless thugs, you know?
And the movie does this device where it flashes a little like comic book style infographic over the screen of who the adversary was and what their grudge is against Harley that helps you sort of orient yourself because they're not given names and too much other detail, but you're like, oh, this is this guy. This is why he's coming for her.
It's kind of hard to feel bad for Harley in the scene where a guy who got clown makeup forcibly tattooed in his face wants to get some revenge for it.
Yeah.
She was kind of a shithead.
Yeah, that's the cheeky fun of the whole movie, though, is that she is really kind of an evil villain, and killing and maiming people is no big deal for her in that Joker way, and laughing about it. That's always been the anti-hero thing that you had to sign on to if you were going to decide to be a fan of her and the Joker. And it continues in this, although, you know, it's so much more personal because she's narrating this one for you. She's telling her life story of abuse and shit that she went through, so it makes her even more sympathetic, but she still does a lot of shitty stuff.
So what'd you think of the intro here? It goes back and forth between live action and animated. It's very colorful. It's very fast paced. I thought it was like a really good way to grab your attention and kind of get you up to speed with the tempo of this movie.
It's fun. You're in for a ride, especially in this first section of the movie. It's got the animated sections, and then it continues, like we were saying, where it'll do freeze frames with overlays and lots of rapid cutting. And it's fun. It's exciting. I was totally on board in the first half of the movie or so.
You did have a note about downtown LA being Gotham City, and I have to agree. It was a little too bright. The streets were a little too wide. The alleys weren't quite narrow and frightening enough.
Yeah, I was wondering, like, if it's just me because I recognize the streets and I'm like, yeah, that's LA. It's not dark and gloomy and rainy like I always think Gotham is supposed to be. And does everyone see that? But it's interesting that you also could tell that this was a sunnier land than we're used to Gotham City being.
In my opinion, Gotham is Chicago or like lower Manhattan, and downtown LA does not share a lot of, architectural touch points with those cities.
No, it looks urban enough in the streets that they picked, but you're right, the streets are pretty wide. It definitely doesn't have that tight lower Manhattan feel.
Yeah, and the alleyways need to be more ominous. There needs to be more thugs lurking. But most of this movie happens in the daytime too, which is another reason that it probably looks like a different type of Gotham to us.
I'm kind of glad that they would allow that, because I feel like from the very beginning, from the first Batman movie, Gotham was a downer to me. Even though I'm like, okay, it's supposed to be dark and gloomy and ominous and goth. Goth is right there in the name. It's been too cartoonishly, I don't know, like kitschy.
Dangerous.
Dangerous, but in a kitschy kind of way. It was always like that Art Deco goth thing. And I'm like, I don't know, it always felt too corny for me.
The Art Deco thing is definitely a Burton kind of indulgence. But I thought in Batman Begins, they did a good job of making Chicago look like a real kind of Gotham.
Yes, I like that version of it. I like Nolan's Gotham.
Not in the third one where we went to Pittsburgh, because Pittsburgh looks so different from what we saw in the first two.
Oh,
I'm like, it's not the same fucking city.
It's funny how much the city actually makes a difference in the flavor of the film.
I thought the Batman had a pretty good Gotham, but it was pretty similar to the Nolan ones. I think the tone was overall different from the Nolan movies enough where it didn't feel like a retread, but the city itself had kind of a similar vibe.
And, this is Harley Quinn's Gotham, and it's got its own vibe, and it works for her.
Speaking of vibes, what do you think of Harley's vibes in this early section? Were you rooting for her? Because her character she talks a mile a minute. She's an unreliable narrator. Like we mentioned, she does some fucked up stuff. Were you getting fed up, or were you on board?
I think as with the movie as a whole, I was riding that very dangerous ragged edge of she's the definition of a person who's a lot, right? She just everything from her exaggerated accent to her
Mr. J.
And Margot Robbie is a very charismatic actress, so she does a great job at making it all palatable and fun rather than grating. And mostly I liked it, but I felt like I was too close to the uncomfortable edge to be totally at ease. What about you?
No, I was on board with it, but I understand your trepidation because this is the kind of character where if you're not on that wavelength, it could get old really fast.
Yeah.
But luckily that wasn't a problem for me. And I was pretty excited to get a Rosie Perez performance in a $100 million movie in 2020. We haven't seen too much of her on the big screen in the years right before this.
I thought that was really cool because she seems as vital and as fun as ever. She's got this cool role that's kind of a foil, but not a direct enemy of our heroine. She was great in this. She was definitely a shot of energy. She got a lot of screen time. The movie does try to tell the stories of all the women in it. It's not just Harley's story with people hanging on to it. So it is Detective Montoya's story too, of being overlooked in the GCPD and standing up for herself. And I thought she was great in it. I really liked her.
58 years old. She still looks great. Rosie Perez rules. I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah. In this movie, she made a great argument to like cast this woman in more stuff. Good actor.
I remember being really excited too when she was in Pineapple Express, and then like there wasn't that many big movie roles after that one for her. Keep hoping it's going to lead to the Rosie-essence. The Rose-essence.
We're ready for one.
The Ace Chemical sequence here. Ace Chemicals is a big part of Batman lore, specifically Joker lore, and they've already kind of set up that location in the Suicide Squad movie as a key part. So I thought that was a cool sequence to see her blow it up.
It was neat, and then the visual effects are really fun, right? This is part of the heightened reality of this movie. She blows up a chemical factory, and it's just beautiful colors and sparkly fireworks type explosion.
There is a theory floating around about Harley's perception of things.
Okay.
And it mostly stems from the police station fight. So maybe I should save it.
We'll get to that. But you're saying it may not have looked that way to
the rest of the world.
All the characters. Yeah. But it was fun for us. And I'm like, if a movie's going to have a big budget and spend some of it on effects, like this was a delightful little effect. And it matched perfectly with the tone of the character and drove home this point. And then Rosie Perez gets to shine again. In the next scene, she shows up at that crime scene and she instantly knows what just happened. She's like, Harley Quinn just publicly updated her relationship status. And it's kind of obvious, but I just thought it was a great line and it really sunk it home for me because that's the whole point of this first section of the movie is she just broke up, the world just found out, and now shit is coming down on her head. And it just perfectly capped off in this scene.
She's got kind of a Wesley Snipes and Drop Zone thing going on here where she's the only cop that knows what's going on and no one will listen to her.
But maintains like a bubbly attitude, like a bright optimism towards the world and doesn't turn into a gritty, cranky cop.
You do get the sense that she might drink too much based on her interactions with her ex.
That's true.
But who among us? So we mentioned in the monologue that this is an R-rated movie. There's not a ton of R-rated comic book movies out there. Do you think the movie made good use of its R rating to kind of push the envelope a little bit?
It's funny because I didn't think about the rating going in, but when it gets to one scene in particular where we meet Zaz, the right-hand man of Roman Sionis, and he starts cutting the faces off this family that's hanging upside down. You're like, whoa.
That was jarring. Even though I'd already seen this movie, I was like, oh no, they're not going to show it, are they? Like
they stay pretty close. Yeah, they don't cut away as early as you would hope they were going to.
And then even when the face is fully removed, you get a shot where you can see the guy's like face, but it's kind of far away.
Yeah.
And it's not exactly in focus, but you're like they're not shying away from some brutal
that's
violence.
Gross. And there's one where he's got the face in his hand. It's not a close-up, but there's a full body shot of him holding the man's face in his hand. There's some gross stuff to have to think about.
And there's a lot of profanity in the movie too, which is like a fun use of the R rating.
Yeah,
a lot of F-bombs being thrown around. But then even like breaking the driver's legs, it's a cartoonish act of violence, but like it's still a gross special effect and sound.
Yeah, those things are gross.
His knees bend the wrong way. And
yeah, there's one other thug who at least gets some limbs bent the wrong way towards the end too. Those are good. And they did them for me at just the appropriate level of like wincing, wanting to look away, but still being able to enjoy the movie. Unlike when I watch a sporting event and some real person's leg actually goes the wrong way and I immediately have to walk out of the room.
Like the old Joe Theismann tackle from Lawrence Taylor, right? That's the famous one.
I can't remember if I ever saw that or I managed to dodge it, but
yeah, there's MMA has some terrible ones.
I saw one of the really bad ones in that too. I don't know.
Is that Anderson Silva and Chris Weidman? Yeah. Freaks me out to think about. I saw it live.
Shit.
I saw it live in a bar on Long Island, so everyone was rooting for Chris Weidman because he was the pride of Long Island.
Oh, damn.
But everyone was just still sad because of how it went down.
No,
so gross.
Such a shocking. Okay.
For the listeners, Anderson Silva threw a leg kick and Chris Weidman just picked his leg up to block it, but I guess their shins touched at an opportune angle and Anderson Silva had a third joint in his leg. He had his ankle, his knee, and one in the middle of his shin because it was flopping around.
It just snapped.
It was so gross.
So gross.
That's my fucking nightmare. All right, are you ready to walk through the middle of the movie?
Yeah, let's move on from gruesome stuff.
Back at Gotham PD headquarters, Montoya explains to her boss that Roman Sionis is about to get his hands on the Bertinelli diamond, the key to the massive lost fortune of the Bertinelli crime family who were wiped out in a massacre many years ago. But a young pickpocket named Cassandra Cain, played by Ella J. Basco, steals the diamond from Sionis' right-hand man Zaz, played by Chris Messina. Cass is immediately picked up by the cops for a different theft, and so she swallows the diamond to keep it hidden. Meanwhile, Sionis is about to kill Harley when he finds out the diamond is gone, and she makes him a deal to spare her life if she can get his diamond back. He lets her go, then puts out a $500K bounty on Cass as an extra insurance policy. Harley immediately launches a one-woman army attack on the police station station, dispatches all the cops, and rescues Cass from a gang of Roman's bounty hunters. Back at Harley's apartment, Harley and Cass spend a little quiet time and do some bonding while they wait for Cass to poop out the stone. But Harley's landlord, her last remaining friend, has ratted her out for money. The cops and the crooks both arrive at the same time, and Harley has to flee her home. Alone with no one left to support her, Harley reluctantly agrees to hand over Cass to Sionis at an abandoned amusement park funhouse.
With all the unpacked flashback stuff stuffed into the first act, where a lot of that actually happened in the middle third of the movie, where they go, oh, by the way, I should tell you what happened 4 days ago.
Right.
It made our middle section seem a little smaller than it is. It's got one big set piece where, well, it's got a few. Where do we start? It starts with Harley in the clutches of Sionis, and it looks like he's gonna do her in. And that's where we get to see the two baddies, Messina and McGregor, kind of go to town and really be nasty.
We're fairly certain that Harley Quinn is not going to die at like 38 minutes into a movie named after her. But it's still like a pretty grim scene. You're pretty certain some bad shit's going to go down when she manages to talk her way out of it, not before taking a few licks. It's like a nice little reprieve.
Yeah. The staging of it is theatrical in the real world thing that happens. We talked about Harley's perception. So there's definitely a little excursion in her perception in this section, but it starts out already theatrical in the real world version of it. All the henchmen are standing around and they're arrayed in a chorus line and they're pointing guns at her dramatically. And then she gets hit in the head and starts to get woozy. And then the movie jumps into a music video of her singing Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend, the bad guys in tuxedos. And I was like, what was that?
Yeah, it was an interesting choice from the filmmakers, but it fits the movie. Like, it felt of a piece with the rest of the nonsense going on here, the chaos.
Yeah, the movie kind of keeps you off balance. I guess that's, in a way, we could be praising it for that. Like, it moves fast, takes no prisoners, and weird stuff happens, and then it moves on.
No, it moves on to an action sequence that I really, really like.
Yeah.
The police station attack, I think, is just super cool. It's one of my favorite kind of raid on a single location set pieces in recent memory. Harley walks in to set the scene. She walks in with a bandolier of, what are they, the beanbag rounds for her shotgun?
Yeah.
And just starts lighting people up. She's got maybe like 15 shots in there, but she's also like hitting people with the gun, using their weapons on them, using some gymnastics, some judo throws, I noticed. And she's taking these cops out, but, you know, she's taking them out with non-lethal force. And sometimes she shoots a guy and confetti explodes from her gun.
Yeah, the confetti explosions are amazing. Like, visually, as we said, there are some moments in this movie where the flourishes captivate you. And this is one of them. She shoots, like you said, there's different rounds. There's straight beanbag rounds. There's like colored smoke rounds, which makes the atmosphere really colorful and exotic. And then there's these finishing blows on certain cops. They get hit with these confetti rounds that just explode in a glitter of confetti. And the guy does an amazing stunt where they do a full, 360 flip in the air in slow motion. And they're just delightful. It's a balletic sort of fight scene. But
super well choreographed. There's no wasted movements. It's really impressive.
Yeah.
It's a really fun scene to watch. But this is where the theory that I alluded to earlier comes from, which is that there's no question that Harley's an insane person. Like, she says it. She has psychosis. And there was a theory that what we're seeing is what she sees in her head.
Okay.
So she blows up the Ace Chemical Factory, and instead of just like a big violent explosion, there's fireworks and bright lights and stuff because her brain is processing that information in that way.
Yeah.
Just like the cops exploding into confetti being dealt with non-lethally could be her way of coping with murdering an entire police station full of cops.
Yeah, it's a great point, and it's really cool to think about. The movie doesn't really matter either way which way you want to take it, but it does add a nice wrinkle, because if you go back and watch that scene again and imagine something very much more bloody and awful is happening in real life, and this is what she's seeing, it adds another layer to it that's pretty intense.
But like you said, it works either way. It doesn't really change your enjoyment of the movie, whichever way you lean, but it is a nice layer on a rewatch to kind of view it through that lens.
The cops who get hit with the glitter confetti bombs, it really feels like they're dead, right? Like, clearly they're kind of just knocked out because it's just a big poof of confetti. But the way they move and the finality of it, it really feels like, okay, she killed that guy.
And she's not above killing people. She kills a bunch of people in this movie. She killed a bunch of people in the Suicide Squad. Killing cops, I think, that might be harder crime than we've seen her do in the live action movies, but it doesn't feel out of character necessarily, especially when her life's on the line.
Yeah. There's transitions to multiple sequences of fights. She does some hand-to-hand with some jailed inmates who get let out, and then she does battle with some goons villains who show up looking for the bounty. So there's just one fight scene after another. And this doesn't have to have some other parallel, but it's a lot of good action.
It's a really long action scene. And the fact that I wasn't checking the clock, because I think I mentioned that in most of the action movies we cover, whatever their final action scene is, I'm like, oh boy. And even though this isn't the final action scene, it's the longest sequence in the movie. I'm pretty sure. I think it goes on longer than the final action scene overall.
Yeah. But when we get there, you and I will probably agree that this was the good one. And we didn't necessarily have the energy to stick with them through all the hashing out the hundreds of villains in that final scene.
Are we in the minority when we say, like, I really feel like a superhero movie can get by with one big action set piece?
That would be a bold thing to do just because of audience expectations, to actually let people down.
Or just like a smaller, I think what Black Panther tried to do was to have the final showdown be a one-on-one fight and not people lifting up cities and stuff. But then they fucked it all up by CGIing them instead of actually just letting two talented stuntmen fight in costume. And it looked like dog shit. But I like these kind of big showdowns at the end of every movie is starting to get tiresome. Not starting to, it's been tiresome for like a decade at this point.
Yeah.
I don't want to be one of those guys to harp on CGI in modern movies, but I think that's part of it too.
I know what you mean. The less real and human and authentic the characters feel, the easier it is to get detached and go, just why do I have to watch? It's like the creativity is just like, how many different ways can you shoot or punch or kick somebody? I don't know. This movie tries to get creative in the end. We'll talk about that when we talk about the final battle scene. There are some moments where it tries to like not just give you the same old, but even then it can be a slog.
Last thing I want to talk about in this section is I was shocked to see that Pedro Pascal actually plays Harley in this movie, because he takes on a young, semi-helpless child and has to protect them, like what's become Pedro Pascal's lot in life in The Last of Us and The Mandalorian, and some real Lone Wolf and Cub vibes from the Harley and Cass friendship. Did it play for you?
I wanted it to, I guess. I felt like two things happened in that middle section, right? It calms down, the timeline straightens out, we're now going forward in time, and then there's this lull. They escape the police station and they go back to her apartment, and you got to have this. You got to have some quiet section of the movie. But I felt like the script wasn't that good, and also maybe not to take anything away from young Ella J. Basco, but like she couldn't save it where the script started to get sort of ham-handed and ponderous. And so I felt like some of these scenes that should have been really cute between her and Harley just felt a little flat for me, and it felt like I was going through the motions. Like I got what they were trying to do, and I like the idea of the young pickpocket under the wing of Harley Quinn, but it wasn't as heartwarming for me as it should have been.
I think my trouble with their friendship and the Cassandra character in general is that she's kind of a frustrating character in that she keeps doing shit that is stupid, and she's a child, and you're like, okay, she just makes a lot of bad choices that keep putting her and Harley in harm's way.
Yeah, I don't know. They couldn't have given her more personality hooks. I was noticing it on the last version that the main trait of her personality is that she doesn't know much about the world. She's this very adept thief. She does get caught once in a while, but in the meantime, she lifts a lot of shit out of a lot of unsuspecting people's pockets. And we see that. You kind of expect her to be somewhat worldly, and yet the defining characteristics are like she thinks the average grocery store is like amazing, and she's never heard of the Joker, even though she lives on the streets of Gotham City. Like it's kind of this oblivious childlike thing, and that didn't play as much of an interesting personality trait, and she just didn't have any other kind of hook that made you like, oh, I love this kid. It's kind of like she was just filling a role.
No, that all tracks. Fair points. I think her character needed a little more fleshing out, but are you ready to walk us through the end?
Let's bring this thing home. At the spooky abandoned funhouse, Harley sets up shop, and she duct tapes Cass to a toilet while waiting to make the transaction. Then Detective Montoya shows up to try to break things up, but Harley subdues her. Then Dinah and Zaz arrive to collect the diamond, but Zaz wants Dinah to cut the girl open to get it, which she's not down to do. Suddenly, the crossbow killer appears and shoots Zaz in the neck. The crossbow lady reveals that she's actually Helena Bertinelli, lone survivor of her family's massacre, who spent her entire life training as an assassin to get her revenge. Then, as Sionis and an army of his goons converge outside, the five ladies look around and decide that they better team up if they want to survive this. A massive battle ensues inside the funhouse, and the women emerge victorious. But Sionis makes off with Cass, and Harley must pursue them alone down a spooky, foggy, dilapidated pier. With some teamwork, Harley and Cass knock Sionis off the pier and blow him up in midair with a grenade. Later, all five ladies ladies get together over tacos and margaritas. And we find out that Dinah, Helena, and Montoya have decided to team up and fight crime as the Birds of Prey. But Harley's not down with them. She takes Cass as her new apprentice and returns to her life of crime.
I did want to shout out that when Montoya shows up at the funhouse to fight Harley, she's drunk, which I thought was really funny. And then she just gets thrown out a window. That's where this movie shines for me. Like those type of scenes.
Yeah, maybe I didn't pick up enough on that aspect of her character. They had a lot of characters to try to humanize and give them stories and give them traits. Montoya gets more. She's kind of second build or maybe third build compared to Jurnee Smollett's Dinah character, who gets a lot of screen time at the beginning.
Mary Elizabeth Winstead is actually second build, which I found strange because she's probably the smallest role out of the Birds of Prey themselves.
She's the smallest role, and I wanted to love her because we love Ramona Flowers very deeply.
And Nikki Swango, if you haven't seen season 3 of Fargo, she's great in that. And she's a total babe.
Yeah, she brings this thing. She brings this it quality with her. Maybe I got that from her character in Scott Pilgrim and not from her as an actress, but she just embodied that so well in that movie that I'm like, oh, that's who Mary Elizabeth Winstead is. I love her. I'm going to love her in this. And she's kind of barely in it. She is the mysterious one. She's got a motorcycle helmet on in some of the scenes and doesn't say much. And then when the movie tries to sort of show you who she is, I think what they're saying is that she's kind of a dork. She's not very social because she was raised by assassins and that's all she knows.
Yeah, they keep calling her the crossbow killer and she's like, no, I'm Huntress.
She's kind of put upon because she can't get her name out of her mouth before someone interrupts and calls her something else.
They said she has a bow and arrow and she retorts that she's not 12. It's a crossbow, which I thought was a funny line.
Yeah, they gave her one funny line where she had a strong comeback. But otherwise, she's a little goofy. And so I couldn't quite zero in on what her style was supposed to be, truly badass or goofy or dorky or some combination. And it just, I wished for more from her. It's actually pretty impressive that they do bring all these characters around. They have an arc. It may be kind of a shallow arc, but like you see these 5 women's journey from the start of the movie to the end. And that's kind of a lot to fit in a movie that doesn't run over. It's, 140 something? So like you kind of got to give them some props for getting all that squished into this tight movie.
I wouldn't even call Canary's arc a small arc. Think about where she starts. She's like a longtime lounge singer. She then becomes a driver for a crime lord, then becomes a reluctant police informant, and then becomes a full-fledged vigilante crime fighter. And she's like 5th build.
Yeah.
Which is pretty impressive. That's good writing and good directing to make that all feel kind of natural.
Yeah, now that you lay it out, that's pretty killer.
And Jurnee Smollett's they're all really winning personalities and actors. So it makes it a lot easier to connect with them.
It's funny because this is where I felt like I had lost steam. Like we were already saying, this fight in the funhouse. It's the big slam bang battle at the end, but you and I were both already kind of out of steam and wishing it would end quicker. But yet when I go back and look at it, I'm like, I got to give them props for bringing stories home of 5 characters and making it all work and making it all wrap up at the end.
It's a juggling act and they do a good job. And in this final battle sequence, it goes on a little too long, but we also get to see Harley with her signature mallet hitting people in the head, which is always fun.
A lot of those big budget comic book movies, they're like, well, you know what? We spent the money. We hired the actors. We hired the VFX company, put everything in, put everything on screen. And this movie, these filmmakers were like, we got to keep it tight, even though we've got this crazy movie stuffed full of characters.
Cathy Yan did mention that she didn't have full control over the edit.
Oh, okay.
So I wonder if the version we got was her. She did say she doesn't think that there's a Cathy Yan cut out there.
Okay.
Like there's not a version in her head of what she would have done differently, but like she wasn't the one making the final decisions on the edit. So she feels like it maybe got away from her a little bit at that point.
Interesting. I wonder if that's a case of the studio meddling, not going too wrong, like actually being like, oh, let's keep this short, let's trim the fat and counteracting. Not to say that Cathy Yan specifically would have been an indulgent type of director, but we certainly know some of the directors who get involved in these kind of movies are more than willing to indulge themselves.
And the thing about Yan is that we just don't know. She has one feature before this that is, I believe, relatively hard to find.
I hadn't heard of it.
And I've never seen it. So I don't know what her proclivities are as a director. And
that's true.
I bet Warner Brothers didn't have too much of an idea either, even if I'm sure they watched Dead Pigs. But if that's the only movie, if you've seen one movie from a director, you don't really understand their whole process and approach to filmmaking.
And even the ones that you think you do, you throw them into one of these IP machines, something very different can come out.
Yeah. I did want to shout out the Sionis death scene.
Yeah.
Because without spelling it out too much, he's holding Cass with a gun to her head. Harley's trying to figure out how to get out of this. And then she pulls the pin on a grenade that's in his pocket, I guess. When Harley notices what's happened, she throws him overboard. And like my first thought was like, oh, he's going to hit the water and we're going to see like an explosion underwater, which is like kind of cool, but not quite what I would hope for. No, he blows up halfway down the pier and like you see him split into like 5 different pieces.
Arms and legs go splashing into the water. It's pretty sick.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Cool kill.
It's a cool kill, as we love to say. And the other thing was cool about it is that it happened quick. There's a little bit of, villain monologuing, but it's a villain that we've already established is kind of a jabberjaw idiot. So like it's in character for him. It's not drawn out. And then his end comes fast, right? Like we just sat through a long battle with 100 goons. And like when he goes, he's gone. And you're like, oh, that was fun.
Yeah, totally dig it. Was a very, very cool way to dispatch Sionis. And then the ladies go out for tacos, which looked delightful. I love tacos.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a taco.
Yeah, that does look good. Wonder where that actual taco place is. It looked authentic, like they scouted a location and found a really cool taco spot in downtown LA.
Well, hold on. I bet I could find. Oh, that's Gil's Super Burger.
Oh,
is Taco Dirty. I don't know if they also serve tacos, but if you're ever in downtown LA, check out Gil's Super Burger. They're still open. Cool. Got good ratings on Yelp.
I got to look into that. Yeah, watch where you park though, because Harley Quinn might steal your car and drive away.
It's always a problem. I'm just looking up their menu now in case I'm ever in downtown LA and wanna. Man, they have a weird menu. Got like chicken teriyaki, spaghetti. This place rules. I love this.
LA doesn't have Greek diners, but they have a lot of little places that have insanely varied menus like pizza, sushi, and ice cream.
They have burritos, so you can go get a burrito.
Okay.
There. Maybe it'll make you poop out a diamond. Who knows? Oh, was there anything else plot-wise we need to talk about, or should we start getting into some of the behind-the-scenes factoids and career paths?
Yeah, let's go back behind the curtain.
All right. Let's start with Yan, good old Kath. She hasn't released a film since this one, which is kind of a bummer because I want to see what she's up to. But she did direct the excellent season 3 Succession episode, The Disruption.
Oh, cool. That's a good credit.
Yeah. And she's working on an adaptation of Rachel Kong's short story called The Freshening with Ali Wong.
Oh, neat.
Last update on that was in 2021, though, so I'm not sure what the current status is. So now, Christina Hodson wasn't a big name when she wrote this movie, but she's kind of become a in-demand screenwriter. So she wrote a movie called Shut-In, which she also directed, something called Unforgettable, which I can't quite place, Bumblebee, which was not bad. I enjoyed the Bumblebee movie.
Okay.
Birds of Prey. She wrote the Batgirl movie, which got shelved indefinitely.
Well, bummer.
By HBO Max. And then she wrote The Flash and the upcoming Fast and the Furious 11, which is not the one coming out in a couple of weeks, but the one coming out after that one. But then that's not all. As you could see, Bumblebee is comic book adjacent. Transformers comics do exist. Yep. Birds of Prey, comic book. Batgirl, comic book. The Flash, comic book. Fast and the Furious might as well be a comic book. So she was one of the writers assembled by James Gunn in January 2023 after he was named as kind of the overseer of the DC universe of films to map out like an overarching story for the DC film universe, kind of like what Feige did with Marvel all those years ago, and try to hopefully bring all their kind of disparate universes and multiple versions of the same character, etc., under one roof. So she's kind of helping to shepherd that process.
Well, it only makes sense. Like you said, those credits, she's already got these huge credits inside the DC universe and outside. She's got to be right near the top of the list of people to call into that room, but it's cool that she's part of that now. And everyone's excited to see what James Gunn can do to sort of whip DC universe into shape.
Yeah, no, I'll be following her career with great interest, as Emperor Palpatine would say.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Robbie, because Margot, she's on a bit of a slide.
Uh-oh.
She's only been in 3 movies since this one.
Okay.
She's in the Suicide Squad, Amsterdam, and Babylon. I think at least 2, maybe all 3 are 100 Million Club members. Like, those are some bombs.
Yeah, 100 Million Loser Club, to be clear.
I forget. That's a shorthand for old listeners, but if you're a new listener, you might not understand that context. Yeah, at least Amsterdam and Babylon lost $100 million. I'm not sure. I think the Suicide Squad might have too. The Suicide Squad was a victim of that kind of day and date HBO Max release schedule.
Okay, right.
But it still got a theatrical release and was probably expected to do better than it did. Let's see.
I have to admit something. I heard a lot about one or both of the movies, Amsterdam and Babylon, but I have a hell of a hard time keeping them separated in my mind. Is it because of the 3-syllable words and they're just like both conceptually something historical and out there?
They're both named after famous ancient cities. Amsterdam, maybe not quite as ancient as Babylon, but I think the best way to remember the difference between the two is that Amsterdam sucks and Babylon is good.
Okay.
Fuck David O. Russell.
Right.
made Amsterdam.
That's a thing we say on this pod.
Damien Chazelle made Babylon. Therefore, it's probably at least interesting.
I tried to watch Babylon. It's very interesting. There was elephants fucking on screen and all kind of weird shit going on.
Oh, boy.
It's real challenging. The first 20 minutes are the most debauched Hollywood party you could ever cook up in your sick little brain. And I don't mean you specifically.
Yeah, you don't want to know what I could cook up in my sick little brain.
But I kind of ran out of steam on it. But it was interesting. Maybe I should go back and finish it just to give Margot Robbie a little bit of that back end streaming money.
I wouldn't rush. Something tells me we'll talk about it at some point.
Okay.
So she did Amsterdam, Babylon, The Suicide Squad, 3 huge bombs. And then obviously Birds of Prey immediately before it, and Bombshell in 2019, which also flopped.
Oh, did it?
So that's 5 movies in a row. And she's done some voice work in between, but I don't really count that. 5 live action movies consecutively that bombed. She does have some stuff in the works. She has, of course, Barbie, which everyone's talking about. That'll be here before we know it. Asteroid City, which I'm not super familiar with. And she's working on an Ocean's 11 spinoff.
Wait, is Asteroid City the new Wes Anderson?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, wow. That's coming out soon. It's only like a month away.
Oh, wild. She's going to have a big summer. I have a feeling she's going to be right back on top.
This cast is so fucking Wes Anderson. Not in a bad way.
No, but he has his people.
He's got his people. Adrian Brody, Jason Schwartzman.
Of course.
Ed Norton. I'll check that out. Oh, Maya Hawke's in that. That's fun.
Oh, neat.
She's cool. And I'm interested in this Ocean's 11 spinoff. I wasn't a huge fan of Ocean's 8.
Okay, I didn't see that one.
But I thought I like being in that world again. And I know it's tough to do with the original cast. Not the original cast. They're all dead. But the cast of the Steven Soderbergh reboot, a lot of them are sadly passed on. A couple of them are semi-toxic, like Casey Affleck. So you're not really sure if they're ever going to be able to get a majority of the gang back together for that one.
Brad Pitt.
Yeah, he's kind of on his, the more that comes out about him, the less savory he seems.
Sucks, but now it's starting to seem
like he might be a dick. Rosie Perez, she was in the Clifford movie, which was about what you'd expect from a Clifford movie. I watched it a few times. My daughter likes Clifford. Wasn't bad, but and she did a voice on Human Resources. She's a regular on The Flight Attendant, which I really do want to see.
Okay.
I got to watch that one day soon. That's the Kaylee Cuoco.
Yes.
From Big Bang Theory. And she was also a regular on Now and Then and Your Honor. Your Honor's the Bryan Cranston Showtime series that somebody's mom really likes.
Yeah, I hear good things about that one.
From a mom?
Not necessarily.
It just seems like a show for moms, but I like Cranston. I like Perez. I like courtroom thrillers. I might check it out.
Could be good.
And Mary Elizabeth Winstead, she's only been in one thing post Birds of Prey, which was the 2021 straight to Netflix film Kate, which I did not see.
No.
But she's got some stuff coming out. She'll be starring in Rich Flew, A Gentleman in Moscow, and Ahsoka, which is the Star Wars miniseries starring Rosario Dawson coming soon.
Oh, neat. That sounds fun.
And maybe most exciting, she's going to voice Ramona in an upcoming Scott Pilgrim anime.
Oh, wild.
I assume they're getting the gang back together for that.
Yeah. Is Edgar helming that, or what's the deal?
I don't have a ton of details on it, but I'll see what I could find. If I can find some good info between now and launch day, I'll put it in the show notes.
I'm just throwing these questions out. I don't expect you to have answers. That's just what I immediately ask myself.
So now let's talk about Jurnee Smollett. We both watched Lovecraft Country, liked her in that.
Yep.
She was in Spiderhead and Lou. You watched Lou. Didn't you bring it for show and tell one week?
Oh, I did watch Lou. That was with, what's her name?
Not Annabeth Gish, but she looks like her.
That was Allison Janney.
Allison Janney. I always confuse her with Annabelle. Is it Annabelle Gish? Annabeth Gish. Yeah.
Okay. That was kind of a small cast movie with Allison Janney and Jurnee Smollett running from your boy, Logan Marshall Green. And it was kind of fun.
Oh, hell yeah. LMG. Yeah. So she was in Lou. She's going to be in the upcoming The Burial, The Order, Sunflower. And then here's the upcoming film I alluded to. There's a Black Canary film in the works that she's going to star in.
Oh, really? How fun.
And
that's
go ahead.
We should maybe point out that Black Canary was the name of her character in this movie, or the superhero name of her character.
I think she was just called Canary in this movie. They never called her Black Canary because she doesn't have like the outfit yet, but then when she gets the outfit, it's like all black. So maybe that's where it comes from.
I thought maybe they put it on screen in one of those overlays at the top, but yeah, they never say it. They just call her sometimes Canary.
Yeah.
But it's very interesting. I was going to comment on that aspect of her character. She has superpowers, which are hinted at in the first 5 minutes of the movie, and she uses them exactly one time in the last 10 minutes of the movie, and that's it. Other than that,
seems like it takes a lot out of her when.
Yes, it seems like there's a reason. Yeah,
but also this movie largely eschews superpowers.
It does,
by and large. So it was a little jarring when she actually showed some, but we know that this universe has them because the Suicide Squad has several superpowered members.
I like the judicious use. It was like, okay, we need something to get out of a jam in the final scene. And oh yeah, this character we forgot. She's not just a badass who can kick and punch and flip people. She's got this one thing she can do, and now's the time, honey. And she saves them. It's fun.
I know it sounds like crazy to say it feels like the way people would use superpowers in real life more, but it kind of does. It's like, they cause havoc. They kill people and destroy property and shit. Like you only use them when you absolutely have to, which feels like a smart choice. And I would be remiss. We forgot to bring up the Justified crossover of the week earlier. So I'm just going to throw it out now out of context.
Justified crossover of the week.
Aha.
David Uri, who plays the hyena breeder that gets fed to his own hyena, was Hiram on Justified in the great season 5 of Justified. Was that season 4 of Justified? Season 5 was terrible. Where it's like a DB Cooper type plot where they're trying to find this guy who parachuted out of a plane with a bunch of coke in the 70s.
Okay.
And he plays somebody who might have some information about his whereabouts.
Well, that makes sense. If you've seen his face and his look in this movie, I'm like, that guy would just fit right in the Justified universe. He actually plays 2 roles in Birds of Prey. He plays the hyena trainer, and the twin brother of the hyena trainer comes back for vengeance.
Driving a truck to try to get Harley.
Right.
And if you can't picture his face, listeners, but you watched Breaking Bad and/or Better Call Saul, he is Spooge, the character who famously gets an ATM dropped on his head by his wife and dies. Spoiler alert. Show's been off the air for 10 years. You kiss my ass.
My time is up. I can no longer claim no spoilies on those shows.
Also, his name's Spooge. He's probably not going to be like integral to the plot.
I don't know. If he was on Saved by the Bell, he'd be one of the main stars.
Oh boy. Thank you guys for listening to Birds of Prey. Do you want to hear what we got going on next week, Ian? This is an exciting one.
What's going on?
We are having a visit from an old friend. He's a new friend to the listeners, an old friend of ours.
Oh, you guys are going to like him.
Our homie, Ron Iver from Twitter. And we're doing Gone in 60 Seconds. This is Ron's special request. He wanted to cover the Gone in 60 Seconds Nicolas Cage, Eva Mendes film. So we're doing it.
This is going to be fun. I'm always psyched, but I'm psyched for this one. It's going to be fun to chat with Ron live on the air.
I remember liking Gone in 60 Seconds. I watched it, not like I watched some other movies that we talked about, like Drop Zone and Clue, like not that often.
Okay.
Because I was already like a teenager when it came out, but I watched it a good amount of times and I always enjoyed it. But I was 14 when it came out, or 13, and it was made for people my age, I'm fairly certain.
Yeah. It feels like of a piece. It feels like Hollywood was following your evolution as a young man and feeding you these movies to watch repeatedly. It fits right in the pics.
Oh, shit. You know who directed it? I forgot this. We mentioned it on the episode, but it's Dominic Sena, the Swordfish director.
Oh, wow. Who knew we were coming back around to him so fast?
Yeah, interesting. All right. Cool. Well, that's Birds of Prey. Thank you guys so much for listening. Please remember to rate, review, subscribe to the pod if you can. Follow us on Twitter at BlastZonePod. Email us, blastzonepod@gmail.com. Got another great email this week. Loving all the emails that are coming in.
Thank you, guys. We love to hear from you, and it really feels good to know that some people are out there appreciating the show.
We appreciated your email, Van, just to shout out one of our listeners.
Thank you, Van.
And we'll see you next time in the Blast Zone.
See you next time in the Blast Zone.
The Blast Zone.